Hi, today is February 27th, 2013. You're listening to episode 2 of VirtualizedGeek's Tech Talk. This is a little bit earlier than expected. I'm traveling for work and there's an awful lot for me to do this weekend. I'm actually moving, so I'm trying to actually move in the cycles from when we get these VirtualizedGeek Tech Talks in from late Friday, which was the first tech talk, to kind of Monday, Tuesday. I think you guys consume this geek stuff a little bit earlier in the week than later is what kind of my website data is telling me. So hopefully we'll get these cycles closer to when you guys can enjoy it. This has actually been a pretty busy week. I've debated a lot on the topics I wanted to talk for the second tech talk. VMware, big week for VMware. VMware released the Horizon suite, which is a bunch of different stuff rolled into basically one SKU. Not new products in the sense that there's a lot of new technology in VDI, but most definitely a lot in what they bundled together to compete. Specifically, they don't talk about it on their own podcast, but obviously it's to compete against Citrix and the Zen suite, Zen Desktop, Zen App, and Citrix collaboration tools. There's an awful lot to talk about in that. Probably end up being a blog post comparing the two solutions. I'm a little bit green when it comes to Horizon and VMware View in general, but I think that will make a great blog post versus a tech talk. I'm not up to speed yet on the VMware solution to be able to intelligently talk about it, so we'll talk about that later. One of the things that was pretty interesting in the news is Yahoo CEO Marissa Mayer announced that they stopped are stopping employees from being able to work remotely or work from home. This has been extremely controversial. I think Yahoo is probably doing the best thing for Yahoo, but it makes for great website flounder and for a great blog post. So I posted a top 10 things that Yahoo can do to further improve collaboration at Yahoo. I got some a little bit negative feedback from that. I usually don't do those clickbait type posts, but you know what? It was pretty fun actually. You know, the thought that Yahoo should revert back to 56K modems, because the last time Yahoo was relevant, 56K modems were in style. So you know, that type of tongue-in-cheek type of commentary. I did actually, prior to that spoof on Yahoo's top 10 collaborative things that they can do, I did actually post a little bit more serious of an article or post on what could Yahoo, if you're an infrastructure geek like many of you are that listen to this podcast and view the blog, would you be tempted to go work for Yahoo? Yahoo still has some really great infrastructure and tech. I mean, you think about it, they're still one of the top destinations for websites, for home pages. They still have one of the largest free mail platforms available today. They have a lot of other video content. Just for infrastructure guys, their data centers have to be extremely impressive. So, you know, the thought for a developer to potentially go to Yahoo may not be as appealing on a resume or even from a technology perspective, but from an infrastructure perspective, you know, it's no different than working for in a sense, working for an Apple or a Google or any other big web destination. They have what kind of drives us professionally and technically when it comes to challenges. They still have a lot of traffic. They still have the security issues. They still have interesting products. They have interesting statistics. I'm pretty sure from a virtualization perspective, they have plenty of instances that they have to manage. They have cloud computing needs, both internally and I'm sure externally. Marissa will be looking at opportunities to expand Yahoo's offerings from not just the consumer side, but eventually into the enterprise. I know a few enterprises that actually use Yahoo Mail for their enterprise mail. It's, a decent platform. So, that question's out there, and it's still out there. Would you consider working for Yahoo, even though from a developer perspective, the name is tainted a little bit but I think from an infrastructure perspective, if I personally interviewed somebody that worked at Yahoo, it would be a very interesting conversation. They still have a lot of great, interesting tech, I think. Then some of the other news in tech, Google Pixel, kind of we're VirtualizedGeek is a virtualization blog. Google is one of the premier destinations for infrastructure guys in general. The tech is always interesting. Google Chrome is an interesting platform. Google Pixel, the Chrome Pixel, the laptop, extremely interesting hardware. But being a virtualization focused and cloud computing focused blog and tech talk, more interested kind of in the back end. I always kind of understood Google Chrome, the Chrome OS, from a perspective as a thin client. So when you think about light-end end-user computing, Google Chrome kind of fit into the whole View, mobile, BYOD, headless desktop movement. So you could go with a very light desktop. The Samsung Chromebook that's $250 kind of really falls into that VDI world with all the apps delivered in the back-end data center. Google's approach is to deliver that over the web versus in a thin client, traditional desktop presentation model. The data is all hosted remote, very similar to traditional VDI solutions. So you would look to lighten the client side with technologies that are befitting headless units. So Wise type terminals, Chromebooks, and the Chromebook is had netbook like specs. So when you look at the new offering from Google, it's a little confusing. The hardware is extremely it's extremely sexy. You have a Retina type display, i5 processor, extremely powerful machine. But I personally can't think of a use case for a web browser that has all that power. 8 gig of RAM, 64 gig SSD drive. Tempted to buy the machine and install Windows on it, honestly. So, that's kind of one of the other things that's happening in the news. VirtualizedGeek, I think some of the other interesting posts that I'm really starting to really develop and get a better handle on what's out there and where I think I want to go with the blog has been PaaS versus IaaS. I think in my own mind, I've started to kind of meld the two ideals together. You think of Amazon AWS. Amazon AWS is developer driven with 8 strong APIs into that cloud. For a while, I've been kind of battering the VMware drum for Cloud Foundry. GigaOM had a recent article about how Cloud Foundry is starting to fork a little bit now that VMware has kind of dropped interest in that project, and VMware is starting to double down. We talked about last week how VMware is starting to double down on their infrastructure as a service offering, and then the vCloud and vFabric APIs into that. And I've really been a big proponent of Cloud Foundry and platform as a service in general in the enterprise. And if you think about it, traditionally one of the blog posts I wrote a few months ago talked about how the enterprise is much different than the public cloud space when it comes to shared services. So it's very common in enterprise for us to have shared databases. So, Oracle is very expensive. So unless you have a specific high performance application that needs its own Oracle instance, it makes sense to have shared instances of databases. So when you think about platform as a service, and writing applications to shared platform as a service platforms or shared platforms versus individual individual infrastructure as an instance. I'm sorry, infrastructure as a service instances. PaaS makes sense in the enterprise. I think VMware got a little frustrated with that. The ideal just hadn't really caught on in the enterprise. I think there's still a lot of hope for a PaaS in the enterprise versus infrastructure as a service. I think the APIs and the logic just make sense. But politically, as I think it out, it's a tough sell. As an infrastructure guy, we can't push PaaS on our developer customers. They kind of dictate what they want to use and how they want to use it, and it may be that infrastructure as a service via VMware type vFabric and vCloud APIs is the way to go long term, or Microsoft's approach with SCOM and Hyper-V and maybe eventually some Azure type, although Azure is most definitely a platform as a service, that type of offering. So I'm a little bit on the fence on where I think the enterprise would go ultimately when it comes to consuming resources from a development perspective into the infrastructure, whether that will be a PaaS path or if that's going to be an infrastructure as a service path with strong APIs into the infrastructure. Well, that concludes the Tech Talk for this week. I'll see you guys next month. Kept it under 12 minutes. Told you I'd try and keep it to 10, but I like to talk. Talk to you guys next week. Thanks.